our internal vice president. Our secretary is Hannah Green. Our treasurer is Beatrice Cubitt. Our membership director is Patricia Wadowski. And we have Ann Crosby staying on as our communication director. So that rounds out our people. All right, do we have any candidates here tonight? All right, you want to line up right over here? We'll get the candidates going.
Hi, everyone. I'm new to this. My name is Brenda Miller. I'm a registered nurse. I'm an educator at California. I always say the abbreviation, California State University, San Marcos. I teach leadership, senior nursing students. One class is the traditional BSN students. They're graduating, so my class is the last class. So I'm teaching them not only leadership, government, but also professionalism. They're, going into the profession, and I want to make sure that they're successful nursing students. And I teach the advanced or accelerated nursing students. They have one more class, but I'm also emphasizing that they're transitioning from a lay person to a professional. I'm also an a hospital supervisor at Palomar Medical Center. So I also practice clinically as a leader. I am, sorry, a little nervous. I also have decided, I've been thinking about this for over a year. There's a position at the Grossmont Healthcare Hospital District. There's a position for Zone 3 for the Board of Director position. Last year, I thought that Zone 2 was my district in La Mesa, which it wasn't. I contacted the president of the Grossmont Board of Directors. She's a registered nurse. She was a big advocate and really encouraged me to apply for the position. And I do qualify for Zone 3. Zone 3 is opening up and for the 2024 position, and I'm going for it. And I'm doing my research right now. And Susan? I'm still doing the research. I've gotten as far as I know I need to write a letter to the board to express my interest. And that's where I am at this moment. And I do believe that it is going to be on the ballot, but I think I have to pass the qualification for the board. So
could you repeat your name and office you're running for?
Progress. My name is Brenda Miller, and I'm running for the Grossmont District Hospital District Board of Director position.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I am Dr. Brenda Miller. Sorry.
Dr. Brenda Miller. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. This is incredible to be in person. My name is Joseph Rocha. I am running for Assembly District 76, which is the Assembly District that our Assembly Member Mainshine is terming out this cycle. I'm a Navy and Marine Corps veteran, pretty unusual, but I was a bomb dog handler in the Navy overseas. I was actually kicked out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and I was in the landmark civil rights case that ruled that policy unconstitutional. Following that, I went to law school, and from law school, I returned to the service, committed to finish what I had started, and served as a Marine Corps officer. I served as a prosecutor, and I achieved the rank of captain. So most recently, I just ran for state senate in North and East County, San Diego. I don't think I need to tell anyone how difficult that is, especially for an out gay and Latino candidate Democrat. I earned 150,000 votes as a first-time challenger. Thank you. As a first-time challenger, no name ID, no personal wealth. We came within 3 points of unseating the top Republican in the state of California. So now this assembly seat is neatly nested within that map. It is 95% of what I just ran. And we actually outperformed Brian Jones, the minority leader, that top Republican in the state, within the boundaries of this assembly seat. So just like everything else, I'm trying to finish what I started. I want to make good on everyone's investment. And so we launched in January. We've received, right out the gate, we had endorsements from the Assembly and from the Senate, from labor, from our veterans organizations. And just last week, we announced our second statewide elected officials endorsement, Malia Cohen, who is our first African-American statewide elected politician in the state of California. So we're absolutely thrilled. We're showing that we are irrefutably the strongest position to help defend the seats, to win the seat, and to bring home the $2.5 and $3.5 million that it'll cost to defend it. So thank you. I look forward to staying, hearing everything you have to say, mentor me, teach me, ask me questions, grill me, yeah, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joseph.
Good evening. My name is Timothy Bilash, B-I-L-A-S-H, two eyelashes, I like to say. Thanks for having me here. I am a member of the Democratic Women's Club. I have kind of a unusual, diverse, maybe even esoteric background. So let me introduce myself as a physician. I'm a board certified OBGYN for 32 years. I've taken care of women only. And it's a travesty that, particularly in this county, I believe we have inadequate medical care for most people, but particularly for women. And the rollback of women's rights is appalling. So if there's some way I can be of service to the club, the medical community's been pretty dense in a lot of ways. COVID has made a big problem. So we could talk about that. I'll just make a list of things I'm supporting Ukraine for various reasons. I believe it's the single most important thing for the future of civilization. And we could talk about that. I'm interested in state single payer. The California nurses sponsored it 8 years ago. We did a report with one of the other clubs. I'm a board certified OBGYN, but I've been at a lot of places around the country as a doctor. And I think that's one of the things that would eliminate premiums, co-pays, deductibles. They worked it all out, and then none of the legislators or anybody else was interested. So we could talk about that at some point. And I think the Congress has failed to support women in almost every way during my lifetime even. And you've got to fight for every little inch that you get. So I see the need to eliminate the Senate filibuster as one of the means for the recent bills failing particularly. And if I can help with that, let me know. My website is Vote Dr. Tim, V as in very O-T-E, D as in dog R-T-I-N, votedrtim.com. My name is Timothy Bilash, and I thank you for your time and look forward to the club.
Thank you, Dr. Violet. Wonderful. All right. If that's all the candidates tonight, we will move on to elected officials and or their representatives. I see Doug. Come on up, Doug. Dr. Vilash, what was the office you're running for?
Congress in the 50th.
Congress in the 50th district.
Good evening. It's great to see everybody back in person. I'm Doug Case. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Political Affairs Director for State Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. And as everybody here knows, this is Women's History Month. And today in the Capitol, they had a special ceremony. Each of the senators and members of the Assembly got to pick one person from their district to recognize. And the theme of it was women making history. And the honoree for Senator Atkins for the 39th district is Dr. Shay Ajali. And she is a remarkable woman, as she is a refugee from Nigeria. She came to the United States when she was 7 years old, went to medical school in University of Kansas. She currently serves as a pediatrician at Rady, assistant professor at the UCSD Medical Center, and is the first African-American woman to be the president of the San Diego County Medical Society. And I'm going to pass around a sheet that lists, oh, you can see her up there, that lists her biography. In addition to the one person from each district, because there are so many remarkable women in the senator's district, she several years ago decided that she would have a woman of the district celebration as well. And this year, because it's 2023, she selected 23 women to be women of the district. And I'll pass that around as well. 2 of the 23, and maybe more, but at least 2 of the 23 I recognize as members of this club. Ramla Shahid and Jen French. And so you can go to the senator's website. They're showing it there. Her website is sd39.senate.ca.gov, and it'll list all the women. And I encourage you either to look at the handout I'm going to pass around, or to go to the website and read the biographies there, because they truly are remarkable women. And finally, one piece of legislation I want to bring to your attention is SB 385, which is somewhat similar to a bill the Senator did last year. This bill would create a curriculum for physician assistants to be able to perform first trimester abortions without the direct supervision of a physician. And it's similar to a bill she did last year, 1575, which did the same thing for nurse practitioners and certified midwives. And so this kind of expands on that, because there is a deficit of providers throughout the state. And with what's happening across the country, we're going to need more practitioners, and this will help fill that gap. And so I look forward to coming back in person. And thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Doug. That's a wonderful update. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Any other elected officials or their representatives here today? Oh. All right, let's move on to our program then. For our Women's History Month program, we have from the California Women's Museum, Melissa Jones. She's the Associate Director, and she is going to do a presentation for us on the California suffrage movement. Thank you for coming, Melissa.
Thanks for having me. There we go. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Melissa, and I'm the Associate Director for the Women's Museum of California. This year is really exciting for us because we were founded in 1983, which makes this our 40th anniversary. So thank you for inviting me here so I can celebrate it with you. If you haven't heard of our museum before, we were founded by a woman named Mary Maskell. This is her in her home with a Susan B. Anthony Amendment banner that the suffragists would march with in their parade. She was a self-taught historian. She grew up in Missouri, and she wanted to be a pastor when she was a little girl. And her father was like, "You're a girl, you can't be a pastor." So she went on, lived her life, got married, had kids, moved out to California, and it was here that she really got involved in things. She was a founding member of the San Diego Now chapter, and she was active in an organization called the Displaced Homemakers Association, where it was divorced women and widowed women teaching themselves like how to change the oil in your cars and how to do your taxes, and like all these things that they didn't do because they were professional, homemakers. And she didn't want any girl to grow up the way that she did, not thinking that whatever that they wanted to do was possible, right? And she knew that there wasn't just women currently doing things, but we have this whole history of women being lawyers and doctors and inventors, etc. And so she knew that it was important for girls to be able to learn our history so that they could be whatever it is that they want to be. Equally important, she knew that it was young boys needed to also learn this history, that this can't be a conversation that we just have with ourselves. That when young boys are exposed to women's history in the classroom, that they respect their girls in the class and they grow up and they respect women in the workplace as their leaders and bosses. So at the end of the day, for 40 years, we've been trying to bring about gender equality through promoting women's history. Mary Maskell, even though she couldn't be a pastor, was still actively involved in her church. And one thing that she would do was drive women to church on Sundays. And one woman that she got really close to sadly passed away, and she went over to her home to help clean it out. And it was there that she found all this suffrage materials, like this banner and postcards and posters and sausage and letters from women talking about the first time they voted in 1920. And the family up front was just throwing all this stuff out. Like, we don't know what any of this stuff is. This is just trash. Our mother was a hoarder. It turned out that her mother was Alice Park, who was a California suffragist, who helped us get the vote in 1911. And at that time, they didn't really think women's history of the suffrage movement was anything important. But Mary recognized it. She got her daughter Mary Jr. because if men can name their sons juniors, then she's going to name her daughter Junior. She told Mary Jr. to get into the dumpster and literally save history from the trash. And they brought it all home, and that was the start of the museum. So this is the New York Times in 2020 produced these commemorative editions of the newspaper, and I really liked it because it shows how diverse and how large the movement was to get the right to vote. If we ever get to learn about the suffrage movement in school, we learn about 3 upper class New York women, right? We learn about Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and they were a very important, essential part of the movement. But we're learning their story of how they got their rights to vote. And really, the suffrage movement was completely diverse. It was all women. It was all people, because we needed men to join us in our fight, because they were the ones who voted for our right to vote. And that it took nearly 100 years, which I ask people all the time when I explain this, to question that timeline, because from 1843, which was the Seneca Falls Convention, where they wrote the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments, which is when the women decided we need the vote. That's the official kickoff of the suffrage movement in America to 1920. That's over 70 years. But is that an accurate timeline that encompasses everyone's story and everyone's right to vote? And is our journey to suffrage for everyone complete? Or are we still on that journey? And to honor the suffragists, we need to be aware of voting rights, and we need to keep advocating for everyone's right to vote, because we don't live in a democracy unless everyone has the right to vote. So this is a suffrage map from 1919, so a year before the 19th Amendment. And what you can see is all the Western states already have the right to vote. So there's 2 campaigns going on at this time. There's the nationwide campaign to get that 19th Amendment passed in our United States Constitution, and then there's a state-by-state tactic. Now it's really easy to think, oh yeah, the West, great for women. But really what it was a political strategy by the men living in those states, because these are new territories. They need to have, increased representation in the government. How do you increase the populations to have more representation? You get families to move out there, you get women to move out there. So Wyoming is the first state to grant women suffrage in 1869. Come on, women, come to the West, you have rights. They just want more representatives. California, which we're going to talk about today, we got the right to vote in 1911 through a huge statewide campaign that was led by a diverse coalition of women. So the main woman that I'm going to talk about today, because she's the foundation of our archival collection at the museum, is Alice Park. I tell young girls all the time, she was a California girl just like you. She was a vegetarian. She was a pacifist. She was against war. She was for animal rights. You know, she was just a hippie California girl born in the 1800s. She viewed voting as a tool in order to get what she really wanted to accomplish, which was to end all wars. And that's really what the suffragists, you know, they understood that voting was a tool, that it wasn't the end all be all of their movement, that when they met in Seneca Falls to write the Declaration of Sentiments, that they had this whole other list of grievances. You know, they needed property rights, they needed custody rights, they needed equal pay for equal work. And when they sat down, they wrote all this out, like, well, how do we achieve this? We need the vote. And so for her, the driving factor to push for the right to vote was because if women could vote, they would never send their sons off to die in war. So she turned her Palo Alto home into California Suffrage Campaign headquarters. This is a postcard that is in our archives. And what it was because the suffragists, you know, created grassroots organizing, and everything that we know about grassroots campaign, they kind of perfected in this campaign to get the vote. And so she turned her house into headquarters. She would send off these postcards, which would have a mock-up of what a full-size poster would look like. You know, all the women can vote in these states. Why not California? And you would send it back to her Palo Alto home saying, like, you know, I want these many posters, and she would send you those posters back. And so that's how the communication worked, you know, analog Twitter.
Who funded that?
So they had different different suffrage clubs, and a lot of these women were of money and had their own wealth, and they used their wealth to fund these campaigns. So this is another postcard of Alice Park that I really like to point out, because it really just shows you how our technology may change, but our method for campaigning has not. Because how many times are we logging onto Twitter or Instagram and we're seeing like, these are the senators that voted no on this bill, call them now. This is basically what this was. On this side, it says these women voted, or these men voted yes, women can vote. That we want the suffrage amendment in California to pass. And I also like to show the yes side because you can see the assemblymen for San Diego voted yes in favor for the California suffrage amendment. On the flip side, it will say all the assemblymen who voted no, that they don't want the suffrage amendment to pass.
Are the people on the right yes or no?
This is the whole yes side, and then on the reverse side is the no.
No.
No. We just want to remember San Diego people were good.
You can see very red rural areas of California.
I mean, it was all, California at this time was all rural.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
it wasn't until World War II that we actually started building up and had our population boomed. So at this time, it's all very rural cities. So Alice Park was very successful in her campaigning, getting the word out, and the California Amendment passed in October 10th of 1911. And a reminder, you know, the National Amendment didn't pass till 1920, so California leading the way. And Alice Park dedicated herself to her real cause of peace. And she was so known at this time for her peace work that Henry Ford, you know, the Ford commercial that we just watched, he started a peace expedition to end World War I. And he invited her, and this is the telegraph that we have in our archives that he sent to her, inviting her on his peace expedition on the Oscar II, also known as the Peace Ship, to help end the war. It was full of different journalists and peace activists from around the country. We have some really lovely letters that she wrote to her children, being like, we'll be home, you know, before Christmas. We know that's not when the war ended, and sadly that their peace journey wasn't successful, but they did go around Europe, went to different port cities and tried to talk to people, leaders, about ending the war. And this is also just an example of how little we learn about women in California, because she was such a leader in the suffrage movement. She also was such a leader in the peace movement that after she did this little peace expedition, she then met with Gandhi in India, and we have her notebook for when she met with Gandhi. Like I said, the campaign for suffrage was up and down the state, and it was full of a bunch of different women. And one woman in Southern California, in the LA area, was named Maria Lopez. And Maria Lopez was one of the first women instructors hired at UCLA, and she was a translator. And she was one of the first women to translate all the suffrage speeches and all the suffrage posters from English into Spanish, so that people who spoke Spanish could be informed voters, because we needed their vote as well. And we don't have the Voting Rights Act yet at this time, so we're not having voting materials printed in multiple languages. So she did all that work herself. And, you know, so influential that she was in the California campaign that when in 1913, there was a huge suffrage march in Washington, D.C., and every state had their own coalition of representatives in the parade. Maria Lopez was nominated to represent California in that parade. And then we can't talk about the suffrage movement without talking about the African American women, especially the leaders of the African American women clubs. When you look at their causes that they were fighting for, the social changes that they were promoting, African American women's clubs were decades ahead of their white counterparts. That they were fighting for the right to vote long before white women were fighting for the right to vote. Lydia Floyd Jackson is from one of the founding families of Oakland, California. Her mother actually founded one of the first African American elementary schools in Oakland. And Lydia Floyd Jackson got her wealth from creating a toilet company, which was a cosmetic company. Those Flood toilets, though, was what it was called. And she used her wealth then to invest it back into the community. She was the first legislative chair and the first citizenship chair of the California Federation of Colored Women's Clubs. She fought for the right to vote in California, and when that campaign was successful, she went down to South America and the Caribbean to talk to them about ending patriarchy, which is just also another term that we hear today. So it just kind of shows you how far we've come, yet we're also still fighting for the same things. And she died at the age of 101. And Oakland planted a tree in her honor, and she's like referred to as kind of, you know, like the first daughter of Oakland. That 1913 parade that I talked about too in Washington, D.C., it was led on horseback by this woman named Inez Milholland, who is known as kind of the martyr of the suffrage movement. She was 27 years old and had an aneurysm in Los Angeles in California and died during a speech. So it shows you how much women sacrificed for this right to vote. It wasn't an easy fight, that they worked really hard. And I also like to point her out, because she was so young, that we often think in history of, we see these pictures of women with their gray hair and their rocking chairs. I think, well, how recent is photography? Like, how often would they come to a camera? So it's only in their older age do we see these women's images, but all these women were very young when they were fighting for the right to vote. And then as the vote turned more to the national movement towards the end in 1917, 1918, 1919, it got more radical, it got more militant. And so I like to give nod always to these women who were the silent sentinels who protested in front of the White House, and they were arrested for obstructing traffic. They're right along the sidewalk, right along the fence. They're not obstructing traffic. But they'd be thrown into workhouses and they would be severely beaten. And they went on hunger strike and they were force-fed through tubes. And some women were chained all night with their arms above their head. And when the public heard about these horrific circumstances that these women endured, that's really what pushed it over to win, because you're either on the side of these people who are abusing these women, or you're just like, let them vote. It's not worth it. Like, just women are already holding elected office at this time. So the hypocrisy that women can be in these positions, but not vote for that position, was just kind of becoming more and more ridiculous. So we always like to appreciate the sacrifice that these women made to finally push it over. And then, like I said earlier, the 19th Amendment in 1920 is not the end of our timeline. It is a huge milestone in our voting rights history, that it is the biggest population that's allowed to vote at that time. So it's a huge milestone, but we have some others that we need to talk about. Like, it's not till 1924 that Native Americans are recognized as citizens of this country, so therefore granted the right to vote. It's not till 1943 that the Chinese Exclusionary Act is repealed, so they're allowed to become citizens and therefore have the right to vote. 1965, of course, is the Voting Rights Act, which is then the second largest milestone for granting access to the ballot. And, you know, I always like to tell people, you know, we need to protect our voting rights, just because we have these significant landmarks like the 19th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act doesn't mean that they can't slip away. And so we have to remember this history, but also continue that work. And then the last little milestone I like to point out is that Mississippi ratified the 19th Amendment in 1984, and they were the final state to do so. So congratulations, Mississippi. And then the last slide. Thank you all for your time. If you have any questions about women's history or the suffrage movement or anything, let me know. You can scan this QR code and become a member of our museum. Your membership is really your commitment to increasing representation of women's history, not only in our museum, but in our classrooms. And I have physical membership forms as well with me if you want to just fill it out by pen or pencil. And we are the only women's museum in the state of California, and we're one of only a handful of museums in the United States, especially when you think about museum that's dedicated solely to telling a broad history of women. There's a lot of, it's like the Women in Military Museum, the Women in Art Museum, the First Ladies Museum, the Cowgirl Museum, but we encompass all women's stories, their experiences, and their diversity. The Smithsonian Museum for Women's History is still decades away from becoming actualized. So we really thank you all for your support.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And if you haven't been to the Women's Museum of California, it is currently located at the Jacobs Center, right there next to the Jacobs Center Celebration Hall. And it's wonderful. They have a really interesting exhibit right now called Crafting Feminism. And it's all about the textiles and crafting that women have done throughout suffrage movement and up to now. And in fact, I think they have an event Wednesday night where you can go and learn to crochet granny square, and they're making a giant quilt, a herstory quilt. So check out the Women's Museum of California. It's quite special. So thanks again, Melissa. That was wonderful. All right. We have a little bit of history of our own, and we are going to have one of our past presidents, Susan Pinato, come up and just give a short glimpse at the history of the Democratic Women's Club. If you didn't know, we're 9 years old this year, Next year, we're gonna have our 10th anniversary, and Susan's just gonna give you a sneak peek at what we'll talk about next April.
Right, this is just a teaser. So I pulled up an email from our founding president, Linda Perrine, and it's dated June the 10th, 2014, and it's from Ruth Rollins. And it says, congratulations, the Women's Club of San Diego County is now newly chartered. So that was June the 10th, that was 2014. There was a women's club before. That somehow lost, I guess it lost its charter and just kind of drifted away. It was to support a Martha Washington, the candidate woman who was running. So, but this is an entirely different club. We reached out to them and we asked them, you know, could we have all of your paperwork so that we can re-charter with the state? And we couldn't get anybody that was still around. And so we started up a whole new club. And one of the reasons Linda was a very forceful, intelligent, brilliant woman. She was an attorney. She was many things, but she was very smart. And there was another club who actually happened to endorse a male candidate who did not support a woman's right to choose. And she recognized a long, long time ago that LGBT rights and women's rights are tied at the hip. So she realized that we desperately needed to have a women's club. So she approached me, and I have no idea why, and said, I want you to be vice president. And she had an awful lot of dreams. And one of her dreams is still on our website, and it caused an uproar among certain places when we initiated that. And so, John, can you all have homework. This is just a teaser tonight. You all have homework. There was a thing that we started called Who Runs San Diego? It's on the website still. It is as current today as it was when it was written in 2014. And it gives you an education as to how leases are written, city leases, all kinds of things. And I want you guys to be educated. Her belief was that all issues are women's issues because they affect women. Whether it's environmental, whether it's the stock market, whether it's economy, everything. And women need to be educated about these issues. It's not just women's issues. It's not just birth control and our right to autonomy of our body. It's everything. So anyway, this is I'm just gonna, and also, John, if you could bring up the pictures from the Bamboo Lounge of our very first meeting. They're still on here. And you'll recognize some of the people who are on this. We have our website is DWC, and it's a hyphen, not an underscore, SD.org. We have Twitter. We have Instagram. We have 2 Facebook sites. So some of you have discovered that there is a hidden site that we took over from the original club. We have a public site and a hidden site. And I always had a dream someday that the hidden site could be, we could kick out everybody else and just have members, and women could converse about issues in a protected environment. But I've never really had, if anybody wants to do this, take that over. I would appreciate it. All right, so that's it.
Thank you so much, Susan. And next year, we promise a thorough history for our 10th year. We're gonna go back and go through the whole history of the women's clubs. Next, we have from the California Women's List, Nadia Farjood. I will let her tell you what she's going to talk about. But the California Women's List is fundraising for a pilot program. It's very interesting and timely. Nadia?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. To echo Doug, it is really nice to be back in person. Apparently, this is the first meeting we've all been together at for the Democratic Women's Club in 3 years. So thank you all for coming out. It was really exciting and great program. Also wanted to shout out Melissa, who recently presented this past weekend at the Women's Hall of Fame for the county and did a wonderful job at highlighting a lot of the amazing women we have across the county. So thank you for that. And for putting together this great program. And Kathy, congratulations on becoming the new president. And I appreciate the club for inviting me to speak today about a really important topic, which is women's mental health while they're running for office. A really something near and dear to my heart. And I think to a lot of the folks in this room, we don't want individuals who are running for office to suffer any kind of harassment, regardless of their gender. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about what California Women's List is trying to do about it. So just by way of background, my name is Nadia Farjood. I'm the San Diego board member for California Women's List. We are a statewide organization comprised of 19 volunteer board members. So we don't have a single paid staff member, and we work to endorse, elect, and fundraise for pro-choice Democratic women all across the state. And hopefully at the end of this year, maybe some of you will be interested in also running for the board, because we currently have I'm the sole San Diego representative. So we'd love to see some DWC applications come in. But we're going to talk today about this mental health pilot project that we are running based on experiences and discussions we've had with a number of our candidates who talked about the mental health crises they suffered while they were running for office. Thank you, John. We don't deserve you. This is Caroline Menjivar, one of our new state senators. Very exciting candidate, LGBTQ, and a huge advocate for racial and gender justice. But we'll advance to the next slide. Okay, so this is a 2022 year in review for California Women's List. We endorsed 55 candidates at the state and local levels, and 2/3 of those were women of color. This 55 number is doubling from the year before, which is really exciting. And of those, 64% of our candidates won their seats. So we're delighted to have these statistics. And we have a very robust endorsement process, long questionnaire that's really values-based. Have you been a mentor? How have you showed up in your community? Have you taken steps to advance the status quo? And as part of the 2022 election cycle, we got to know our candidates really well through an in-depth interview process. And we had the opportunity to intently listen to and observe the barriers that women face while they're running for office. And all of our candidates are based in California. After collecting stories from these candidates, one trend was abundantly clear, and that's that women candidates often face demeaning and demoralizing criticism, harassment, sexism, misogyny, and even violent threats running for office. A few of our candidates that we endorsed actually dropped out of their races. They didn't feel safe. They didn't want to continue to wake up every morning to texts criticizing their body image. And actually, some of them said they physically would get sick when they would wake up and read their social media in the morning. We actually had a candidate forum where I think Melinda Vasquez, who some of you might know, she asked a number of these candidates, what can we do aside from helping give you money and helping build capacity on your campaign? So door knocking. And a number of these women all together said, come after the trolls on social media for us, please, because that makes a huge, huge difference when you call that out. John, next slide, please. This is a new project, the first of its kind that we're aware of in California, a mental health research pilot. This is kind of our working premise for the project, which is for too long, the hostility and its ensuing effects that women candidates face has been accepted and dismissed as just the reality of running for office. Right. And we're questioning that. Is that the way it has to be? Is there something that we could do that's different? And we're thinking about kind of in the future, thinking about ways that maybe we could think about a revision to the ethics code. Is there policy or legislation that we can advance on this topic? But as a threshold matter, we want to highlight the hostility that women face running for office and change the narrative around the political discourse that we're trying to create across the state. Next slide, please. So there's a few articles that I wanted to highlight, by the way. The beautiful slides that you just saw are from a California Women's List board member, Camille Zapata. So the terrible slides are the ones that I put together, just to be clear. So this top article from the New York Times, this is a 2018 article highlighting the abuse that starts. Harassment is not new for women in politics or anywhere else, and men face it too, especially if they're African American or Jewish. But for women, the harassment is ubiquitous and frequently sexualized. We've heard this from a number of our candidates, a lot of comments and posts about their physical presence, why they were dressed a certain way, why did they put makeup on as they were going canvassing, those types of comments. And it's come to the fore this election cycle, particularly because so many women, and this was in 2018 again, are running. So when you see a critical mass, that can sometimes draw attention. I recommend you take a look at this article. It actually, the New York Times interviewed a number of women about their experiences feeling unsafe running for office, and the New York Times put together a video with it as well. But this is one story that stuck out to me as I was reading it. This involves Rebecca Thompson, a Democrat who ran for the Michigan House in 2014. I'll read this story, and it might be triggering for some people. So disclosure. Strangers followed her home from events and drove slowly, repeatedly past her house. At one point, someone broke into her car. By the end of the campaign, she said she was sleeping at her partner's house because she was too afraid to live on her own, in her own home. So really talking about the mental health toll, to the point that you don't even feel comfortable putting your head on your pillow at night. You need to physically extricate yourself from the situation you're in. And she said, I felt unsafe throughout the entire campaign. It almost seemed like psychological warfare, like they were trying to psych me out. It kept me on edge all the time because I just didn't know where I could go, and she felt like she was constantly being followed. Next slide, please, John. This is another article. This is a November 2022 article talking about some folks at the national level. So Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has become a target for white supremacists. Congresswoman Jai Paul of Washington was stalked outside her house by a man with a gun, and New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Many of us are familiar with her, and she speaks openly and honestly about a lot of the threats she gets, and I emphasize here, on a daily basis. And so this, the next slide, we'll talk about just how Princeton is starting to actually categorize a lot of these incidents, marking them, and women report them, so they can start to do some research of their own about these incidents. The database was created by Princeton University and the Anti-Defamation League, and they found that women are targeted 3 times more than their male counterparts who are running for office. Next slide, please, John. And this is just one example from the local context here. I'm sure there are many more, and look forward to continuing the dialogue for those of you who have stories in this room. This story involves council member Corey Schumacher from Carlsbad. Some of you might be familiar with her story. So she was trying to, and this article is from 2021. She experienced a lot of vitriol from constituents for the work that she was trying to do during the pandemic to ensure enforcement of the public health orders that were in place. Next slide, please, John. This is what one of the many emails that she received and discussed. You will be out of office by the end of the year, you blank off, you dumb blank. This city hates you, and I'm going to put a spell against you tonight. Good luck, ugly blank. Next slide, please. And this is kind of my transition slide toward the more hopeful aspects of the work that we're trying to do. While Schumacher said that she fears for her own safety and her wife's safety, she said she'll press forward. She said she's heard from constituents who are afraid that those COVID-19 health orders weren't being followed. And she said, we need to do the work of making this space, this political space, the space that we come together to negotiate our future. We need to make it less toxic. And so that's what this research project is about. Next slide, please. It's also really important that we do this for the next generation of women who are interested in running for office. This is an article from Sara Guillermo, who runs Ignite, which is a national organization that works on training young women to run for office. And she says, I've met countless young women who care about issues in their communities but who fear, with emphasis on fear, political leadership because of these incidents that they've seen. I introduced them to local, relatable public leaders. They talked together about how important it was to rewrite the rules. Then those young women grow more comfortable with the idea of running for office. She continues, as we see our politicians being more open about the challenges they face, young women will see themselves in leadership more often. I hope they will revel in this new territory and show us bolder, braver versions of ourselves. And so that's what this is also about, right? By uplifting a lot of these stories that women have experienced running for office, we hope that it will make people more comfortable about what to expect and also diminish that fear factor that exists. I'll spin through this pretty quickly. John, if you can just slide down a little bit. Thank you so much. I'll start on the right side here. I think the left side talks about some of the board discussion that we've had about this topic, but on the right side is the more relevant timeline. So March 1st, and this is where I have two asks tonight. The first one is to share this research survey that we have. So tonight, after tonight, Kathy, I'll send you the link and hopefully you can circulate it with members throughout. Hopefully we'll take the survey as well. Haven't been a candidate. Okay, you already did it. Great. That's wonderful. So we have a survey out to ask questions, as I mentioned before, about women and men's experiences. People of all genders can take the survey. As anyone who's familiar with research knows, it's helpful to have a control group to see in what ways do men's experiences differ, if at all, from women's experiences. So we have that survey floating out. And so for those of you who know people who have ran for office, have experiences you think might be relevant to this survey, we encourage you to share that with them. April and May, we're going to conduct wellness roundtables with some of the candidates who respond to the survey, a small group of them, so they can have a facilitated dialogue with a professional mental health clinician to talk about their experiences and record some of the key findings from that group. In May and June, we're going to have a convening of some of the policy leaders we have connections to based on what comes out of the survey and the focus group discussions. June and July is reserved for writing a report. We have Sara Carson, who is a PhD and involved with Emerge California, a training program that you all might be familiar with that is devoted to encouraging women to run for office across the state. She's will be involved in the research process, and then in August we'll publish the report and look forward to sharing the findings with you all. Okay, so two components really briefly. The first is that survey I mentioned. So that's open to all candidates who have run for office in California from 2016 to 2022. The survey asks about candidates' experiences running for office with specific experiences with hostility related to gender or gender identity and the mental health effects they've experienced. Some of the candidates we've spoken to have said they've had to go to more intensive therapy, move, or in some circumstances drop out of their race. And the other component is these wellness roundtables that I mentioned, moderated by a licensed mental health professional for a small group of these candidates who participate in the survey. And they'll be given that anonymous space, so a lot of the comments they make won't be attributed, but they can share openly and freely, so we can get some good findings and honest findings from the research. So here's the kind of high level process. First is conducting the research. So that's that survey and wellness roundtables that we just went through. The second is to publish the report. And third is to develop policy and think through, is there any legislation in California that might be able to address this form of harassment? And it might even be revisions to the local ethics codes, et cetera. So we're taking a wide view of this. So far, in terms of folks who have supported us and pledged to contribute to this effort, is Lieutenant Governor Koulounakis, the Controller Cohen, Senator Susan Telemontes Eggman, Senator Menjivar, who was the opening senator on my slides, the California Nurses Association, and our own Council President Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp have all pledged. So far, we've raised $85,000 or received $85,000 in pledges. Next slide, we'll talk about the budget. So we were dividing it in three parts. The first is the $5,000 for the researcher I mentioned, who is affiliated with Emerge California to draft the report and analyze the survey results. The second is the clinical expert who's going to facilitate those wellness roundtables with women candidates who run for office and would like to discuss their experiences with harassment. And the third is to our fundraiser who's helping us raise funds for this initiative. And that's it. Questions? Does anyone have questions? Yeah,
Just a comment,
sure.
I was recently speaking with, one of the Encinitas city council members, about her experience running, and, she shared that her and former council member received death threats. There were people circling outside their homes, and it was just, and they were rallying other people up to go to their homes, and there was nothing they could do. They couldn't, have a restraining order because people need their public officials, so therefore they can't have a restraining order against any member of the public. And so that kind of scared me as we were sort of talking about the experience.
I'm a lawyer and that doesn't sound correct. Really? No restraining order whatsoever,
what she
regardless of
told me.
conduct.
Or Schumacher tried.
We talked about-
Yeah, and she couldn't get that.
I want to look into that because that sounds wrong and abusive. Yeah,
That's not the case, but that's what she had said. I don't know if the city attorney.
that's really helpful to hear.
consulted them, and so it's terrifying for any young woman, especially in a smaller place like Encinitas where you're bound to see people or, you know.
And this is an elected official, not a candidate. Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Currently seated. This was her experience, and experience of. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate, and maybe that's another way we go with the project, right? Is seeing where we might be able to make some changes in existing laws for certain conduct. Yes, any other questions?
I was gonna ask a question, but to piggyback on what they were talking about there. And I apologize, this is a little bit out of order, but in thinking out loud, like maybe if there could be legislation that applies to their homes, like so they could feel safe in their home, but that doesn't keep them away from like council meetings. Like, I feel like that seems, shouldn't that be a happy medium? Like, I don't know what's in my head.
That's okay.
Anyways, that was me thinking out loud, but my question actually, I think this is great. Because I ran for a very small seat in a very small school district, and I received harassment from constituents, but I received harassments from people who were also supposed to be my allies, and that was incredibly frustrating.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was actually quite surprising. But I actually have a question on the organization as a whole, a little bit, and I'm wondering if you've looked at all about where someone is at in, like, I have young children. This is my older, I have a 3-year-old as well, and that makes a lot of things very difficult. And I'm, while I want to say that my husband has been incredibly supportive, he's not as patient with, very young. And I'm wondering if there's been any kind of discussion or research into how far along someone is in parenthood or child rearing, or however you want to word it, and whether or not that affects whether or not they'll run or their success at running.
Yes, it does. So I'm familiar with that's unrelated from this project, but in the women in politics research literature, there's definitely research that shows that having children may influence women not to run for office. And I remember, I think it was not too long ago that Senator Clinton was proposing, and I don't know if this passed or if anyone followed it, that she was proposing that some campaign expenses go to things like childcare.
You can use FEC funding for childcare if it's childcare that you need specifically to go to.
Okay, well, that's good.
I don't know about the.
I'll hand it to the.
So for federal elections, the FEC allows you to use campaign funding as long as it goes directly to the childcare you need in order to go to a campaign event, not just general childcare expenses. But I don't know what the FPPC rules are for state and local candidates.
Those are good things I will take it upon myself to follow up with our focus group, and I will circulate any research that I find about the FPPC question. Thank you for asking that. And thank you so much. I guess my last ask aside from, so I've got two asks. Again, I'll remind you one more time.
Oh, yeah. Nadia, I just want to tell you, this is a really, really important initiative.
Thank
We've
you.
actually had to bring charges against a member of the Central Committee here in San Diego County. Wendy Wheatcroft was doxxed by this person. And then our vice president, Tiffany Boyd Hodgson, and then I think Andrea Beth Dansky, we all got together and did an ethics complaint. And that should have been an ally. It was a male and it should have been an ally. So this is important.
I agree with you. Thank you. So oh yes, Elise, sorry. I know I'm over time. I'm over time probably.
You're all probably aware that when Black women run, we come with mental health problems in the event in the beginning. So I'm wondering if your project is going to have, and Black mental health help is not very large and we can't get to them quickly enough. So are you all going to be doing anything with ensuring that Black women get their mental health taken care of?
Yes. So for those who are participating in the wellness circles, the reason we picked the particular researcher we did is because she has a great background in cultural competence and also has a number of credentials in the DEI space. So we were very intentional about the person who is going to be facilitating dialogues that can create a lot of trauma for people, right? To relive a lot of those difficult experiences. And we'll also, in the analysis component, look at the differences between white women and women of color who are running for office with a specific focus on Black women. So thank you for raising that.
Well, just a quick question, because
Sure.
This is all new to me, and this is something that I didn't even consider or think about when I, reached out and considered running for a position. So this is all new. So myself, when do I reach out? As far as being harassed or.
If there's an experience you have while you're running for office as a candidate, we would love to hear about it at any stage in the cycle. So either beginning, middle, or end. We would love to hear from you. Okay. So again, I'm just going to repeat the two asks. One is I hope that this club will consider making a contribution to support this important research that we're doing. And the second is after the meeting, I will follow up with Kathy, who can hopefully circulate the survey link to the club. And I hope that you can share it with those who have been candidates who would like to participate, of people of all genders. We're interested in everybody's experience. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you.
Okay, so sometime last year, I heard Ms. Farjood asking me to join what is called the Gray Society, which is part of the Women's List Society. And then about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I first heard about this project. And I looked at this project and I said, this is exactly what the Democratic Women's Club is about. We want to support women candidates. We want to help them get into office with no, without the stress that they're dealing with. And
Do I hear a motion in there?
I would like to make a motion that the Democratic Women's Club of San Diego County make a donation to the is it to the actual women's list of California? And I would like to suggest that we do $1,000.
All right, do I have a second? Second by Elise Pipkin Allen. Any discussion?
No.
Would we like to have the treasurer's report quickly? This is Beatrice, our treasurer.
Nice to be here. I'm going to make this really quick. So as of yesterday, we have in the bank account $6,862 and glorious 12 cents.
All right, all in favor?
Didn't have a second.
Yeah, we did. All in favor of the motion to donate $1,000 to California Women's List for this pilot project, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. It is our pleasure. Speaking of pleasure, I now have the pleasure. I'm absolutely thrilled to have this woman here. She's one of my favorite millennials. She's definitely my favorite member of Congress. And she is the only woman representing us in Congress from San Diego County. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, the Honorable Congresswoman Sara Jacobs.
Well, thank you guys. It is so nice to be back here in person with you all. I feel like it's been a really long time since I've gotten to see so many of you, and it's so nice to see all of your friendly faces. And congratulations to the new board, including the new president, Kathy. So as Kathy said, I'm the only woman representing San Diego in Congress, and I have to say how grateful I am to all of you for all the support you all have given me from the very beginning. When no one thought that this very young woman had a shot at winning a race, you guys were there. And I'm so grateful for all the work that you do to help get women elected, because it matters. And it matters because it's the right thing to do, but it also matters because it changes policy and it changes what we talk about. So I was actually the first person in the history of Congress to talk about my own period on the House floor and my own use of contraceptives, including Plan B, on the House floor. I mean, it's 2023, right? And these issues have been treated like they are this side thing that only affects some people, when it affects every single one of us. And for me, as a young woman, when we're talking about reproductive health care, first of all, it is my health care. There were many years where that was the only doctor that I went to. But also, I'm a 34-year-old woman, right? So everything I talk about with my friends and my peers is like, who's having a baby, who's not having a baby, who wants to have a baby, how are they affording childcare, right? These are kitchen table issues. And it's time that our Congress reflects that these are the issues that the American people are talking about at their kitchen table. And so I'm so grateful to all of you to help me be there. And we've already been able to get a lot done in my first 2 years on so many of these issues. Including the first time we passed gun violence prevention legislation since I was in elementary school. The biggest investment in climate change the federal government has ever made. An infrastructure bill, so many more things. But we also saw a lot of setbacks, right? We saw the jobs decision come down last year, and we saw the effect that's had on people across the country. And we're already waiting right now to see what this one Texas judge is going to do that could possibly take access to abortion medication away from 40 million Americans. And so we've come really far, and I'm so proud of everything we've done in my first term. But we have so much more work to do to protect access to reproductive health care, not only in some of those states we hear about in the news, but right here in California. Because if this decision comes down by this judge, it will affect us here. And if the Republicans keep the House of Representatives and win the Senate and win the White House, you better believe they're going to put forward a federal abortion ban. And then not even our constitutional amendment here in California is going to protect us. So this is not just a fight about other people. This is a fight about us here. And I'm so grateful to San Diego and to you all for electing me, because it's so important that we have people who are the age of people who are experiencing this problem right now. It's not to negate anyone else's experience, but the post-Roe era is very different from the pre-Roe era, right? We now have this huge digital surveillance system that's being used against people seeking abortions and those trying to help them. And so I introduced a bill called the My Body, My Data Act that would help protect reproductive and sexual health data from being sold or shared from period tracking apps, from websites. I've introduced legislation to close loopholes in HIPAA that would protect reproductive health data. Our current privacy architecture is not set up for this post-Roe era. And so we need to be looking at all fronts to, one, win back the House and the Senate and the White House so that we can codify access to abortion as the law of the land for everybody, and work to put in place protections for people in the states who are criminalizing abortion right now. And that's what I'm working on doing. So So thank you all so much for everything you do, because we need amazing women elected at every level of government. We're gonna have to fight this from the city to the state, to Congress, to every level. And I know you all are doing so much on that. And also thank you, Nadia, because it is very hard to run for office as a woman. You were talking about some of the stories. I've had a number of death threats just this week. It is very, there's just this extra level of scrutiny that female candidates get, an extra level of harassment, and not enough protections on that. And so thank you for what you're doing, because it's so, so important. And I'm glad this club is able to support it. Yeah. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, because I'd rather talk about what you all are interested in hearing, but I'm just so happy to be here with all of you and so grateful for all the support you've given me over the years.
I have a question. How is it that they could cherry pick where they go to see a judge that they know is gonna pass something? How is this done?
I mean, it's a classic case. I'll actually let Nadia, the lawyer, talk to it more, but it's a classic case. It's a classic case of judge shopping. And what they did is they picked this specific judge who was a Trump appointed judge who had previously worked on behalf of nonprofits who were seeking to restrict abortion access, to find a plaintiff who was from that area so they could get that judge. I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Yeah. If you could give any advice to fellow millennial women who are interested in running for office in this political context, what would it be? Yeah, I love that question. People ask me this all the time, and often I feel like as young women, we are often think like someone else knows more than we do, or we should wait our turn. Those of you who've been in this club for a while know that I'm not good at waiting my turn. But you know, I think, and we've seen this generation, the trailblazing generation of female politicians who had to be so guarded and had so many barbs thrown against them and were just hit from every side, right? So my advice to young women, young people who are thinking of running for office is to first figure out what problem you're trying to solve and learn as much as you can about that problem and who's doing what about that problem, because not every level of government actually impacts every problem, right? If you want to work on criminal justice reform, Congress might not actually be the right place for you, because 80% of the people who are incarcerated at the state or local level. So we in Congress at the federal level, that's 20% of people who are incarcerated. That's not necessarily where you can make the biggest impact. If you want to work on education policy, the federal government, we give money, but the actual policy happens at the school board and the state level. So if that's what you want to work on, go to that level. So first, figure out what that problem is that you're passionate about solving, and figure out all the different ways you can solve it. And maybe it's elected office and maybe it's not, right? There's lots of different ways to have an impact. But then once you've decided that you have something important to say, you have a unique perspective that's needed, then do it. There's no one else out there who has the answer. Like, if you feel like you have something important to say, then we need you. We are in this moment in our nation's history where no one has the answers. We're in this inflection point. And we're going to need all the good ideas and all the creativity and all of the voices chiming in. So if you feel like you have something to add to the conversation, then we need you right now more than ever. So I hope that you run, and I hope that you don't let all the horrible stories of what female politicians have to go through make you, no, it's important to know, but make you guarded. Because what people want right now is authenticity. That's what they want. They don't, I represent El Cajon. And I go out to El Cajon, and most of the people in El Cajon do not agree with me on just about anything, right? They don't like the way I vote. But in El Cajon, I have amazing favorability numbers and I win. Why? Because they trust me, even if they don't agree with me. That's what people want right now. So don't let everything you're hearing about make you guarded or make you feel like you have to be too careful. Just be yourself. That's what people want. And if you're thinking about doing it, I hope you do. And call us, and we're happy to talk to you about it. Yeah. Anybody else? Questions? So much easier to crowd than back in the day. Come on.
I just want to say I'm really proud of you. And me too. We're really proud of you. I've been obsessed with you on your social media, how you get it. I mean, I hope you're not seeing it all, because you should
They don't let
be
me read the comments.
Thank God, because I get on there and I'm fighting, but I just can't believe what she mentioned about combating the trolls. And if you don't say anything, if we don't say anything, your supporters, the people that I feel like you're defending every American, so I can't just say the people you defend. But if we don't get on, then the only voices that are heard are the trolls.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate having this amazing group of women and everyone who has my back, because that really does matter.
I have another question. Is it really, are there that many sheep in Congress that serious?
Okay, so here's the secret about Congress. I'm gonna say a secret into a microphone. This is lesson one of being a politician, not to do this. No, so the secret of Congress is that it's high school. So you all, we're in high school, right? Okay, so you start and you get in and you go to orientation and you pick a lottery for what room you're gonna get, and then you're friends with who's on the same floor as you, and you join clubs and groups, and that's who you're friends with. And there's no assigned seating on the House floor, but there's like unassigned assigned seating. If you like accidentally sit in the wrong area, you like kind of get in trouble. I did that my first week, lesson learned. And it is a lot more about interpersonal conflict than high-minded policy debate in most cases. And so but just like in high school, right, there are a lot of people who will just go along with what leadership or whoever is saying. And, frankly, you kind of need that because there's 435 of us. So if everyone wanted to take a stand on every single thing, it would be impossible to get anything done. But yeah, I mean, it is really, people aren't like, they're not like special people in Congress. I say that as a congressperson, right? Like, they're just like you. So like, if you're mad at someone and they're trying to get you on their bill, even if you agree, you're kind of like maybe gonna fight about it a little bit. It's high school.
Good evening, Sarah.
Hi, I don't know if you all know, but Angela Joseph was my State of the Union guest, and we were really happy to have her with me.
Well, I wanted to say that, we were talking about women's history, and Susan got up and she talked about how this club was started and everything. And I just wanted to tell a little anecdote that Sarah and I actually met when we were both kind of auditioning for the women's club at Susan's apartment for the board. And this was about 6 years ago when you were first.
I don't even think I'd announced yet.
No, and you were there to meet them and I was there to meet them. But I wanted to say to people, because a lot of times, we see politicians, we make up a story in our mind about what they're really like. And I just wanted to thank you because you're the same as you were when I met you 6 years ago. You're accessible, you're kind, you're doing a great job. And did you get my doll that I sent you?
Did, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have a practical question.
Okay.
So you are now serving under your second leadership person. Can you talk a little bit about how that leadership change has affected how the whole thing is run?
Yes. Are you referencing McCarthy or Hakeem? Speaker. Okay. Yeah. Because we also have new Democratic leadership, which we're really excited about. No one will ever replace Nancy Pelosi, our first female Speaker of the House, and I would argue probably the best Speaker of the House we will ever have. But we are also really excited about Hakeem Jeffries and our new leadership. And I haven't spent quite enough time with Hakeem to be able to wrap the A through Z's for you, but maybe after a few more years, I'll be able to. I'm actually on leadership, so I'm part of Hakeem's leadership advisory team. I represent the 5 junior classes. So I'm the youngest member of leadership, actually. But, I'm sure you all were glued to C-SPAN for the speaker fight this year. Yeah, I got texts from some of you, so I know that you were. But I think that it's a real indication of the kind of leadership or lack of thereof that we're seeing from Kevin McCarthy, right? He has mortgaged his speakership to the far extreme right of his party, and he cannot get anything done without them, and we're seeing it. They're not bringing any real bills to the floor because they can't agree amongst themselves on what to bring to the floor. And I'll remind everyone that Nancy Pelosi had the exact same majority 2 years ago when we passed and the historic legislation and had the most productive Congress in like 50 years, the exact same majority Kevin McCarthy has now. And so we're seeing it. We're seeing it constantly. We're seeing it in what bills are coming up. We're seeing it in the fact that we can't actually talk about anything of substance. They're unable to do anything because he has so mortgaged the speakership to the extreme far right. And, you know, I'm fortunate myself because I sit on the House Armed Services and the House Foreign Affairs committees, and they're historically the most bipartisan committees. And I'm still doing a lot of bipartisan work, including sometimes with people that I'd rather not have to work with, but, you know, I'll do anything to get things done. So like Matt Gaetz and I are actually working together on an amendment to increase fertility access for service members. I know. But he wants to help service members get more fertility treatment access. So you got to work with who you got. We had an amendment last year actually that only passed because he voted for it. 2 Democrats voted against it. So you got to do what you got to do. But so I do a lot of bipartisan work. And those committees tend to be more insulated from sort of the politics of it all. But even still, we're seeing it on our committee. Like the focus of every committee is supposed to be investigations, per Speaker McCarthy. And so even like the Armed Services Committee, where we have to do really important work to figure out what our defense budget should be this year, it's focused on sort of these like fake investigations that Kevin McCarthy has requested the committees do.
Hi, Sarah. You kind of stole my thunder because I was wondering about life with McCarthy.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. But now I'm just kind of still pondering because we're still helping out with the Ukraine war. Is there, I guess I'm worried because I kind of feel like, you know, McCarthy keeps saying what he's not going to do.
Yeah.
Are we going to pull out?
I think there's broad bipartisan consensus to continue supporting the Ukrainians. I was actually just in Ukraine in December. I took that 10-hour train ride that everyone heard about President Biden taking. And then I think many of you know I was in Ukraine in January, right before the invasion. So I've been doing a lot of work on this issue, working with some of the Republicans on how we do better oversight of the weapons, which is what a lot of them are focused on. And frankly, I think it's an important conversation we need to be having around end use monitoring that, you know, we haven't actually updated the way we do monitoring of our weapons since the Cold War. So, you know, we're taking this as an opportunity to try and figure out more broadly how we do that monitoring better. But I think overall, there's a broad bipartisan consensus to continue supporting the Ukrainians, and you have some voices on either side, but they're by no means the majority. I think what I've been trying to emphasize is that it's not a question of support or oversight. You can do both, and we should be doing both. That's our obligation to the American taxpayer. And I also think we're getting to a phase where this spring and summer, we will see one last big push on both sides. And then we'll probably get to a point where the phase of the war changes a little bit, and therefore what the Ukrainians need from us changes a little bit.
I wanted to spend the time telling you how wonderful you are. I'm up in Delmar, and we pay attention. I thank you for your work on immigration. I think you are unfairly attacked, and just keep at it, I would say. My grandparents are Ukrainian immigrants, and so every chance I get, I thank you and push for that. And I will tell you, they will never give up. And if we don't support them, they will never give up. And they have moved 25% of their women and children out of the country to safety. And they will die the last. So thank you for that support. But I want to mention one other issue. The Otay Mesa East Port is being built, and that requires extra money that's being held up because federal funding hasn't been put for the security for that. So they need that guarantee before that happens. I understand it's in the bill. Thank you for your support for the work you do. You and several other California Congress people are working so hard. No one's paying attention, and you're not out there on all the talk shows and you're just working hard. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Sara.
Hi, Mo.
Good to see you. Oh, it's so good to have you here. So I know that you're a fan of each other, Katie Porter, and she's made her announcement, so you're an insider. What are you thinking from California?
Well, I am not making an endorsement in the Senate race. I think that it's for the voters to decide, and I think especially primaries, I don't tend to think that we should be winning it until voters have a chance, especially since we have the top two systems, so there'll be more opportunities. I honestly don't know what's gonna happen. I think there's Well, I think there are three very strong candidates in the Senate race. They all bring different things to the table. And I think it's going to be really difficult to hold on to Katie Porter's House seat. And the two candidates, I'm also not getting involved in that primary, but the two candidates that are strongest are men. So we'll also be losing a woman in the California delegation, which we never like to do. So, but you know, I think it's still early. There's a lot of time yet for everything to change. It's a little early to make any predictions, I would say.
We have our one Zoomer. Ruth Rollins.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi. I seem to have lost you, the page.
Oh, well, we can see and hear you.
Oh, well, that's nice. I can't see you. All I see is Zoom on a white blank page.
What's your question, Ruth?
Well, I was just wondering how Sara enjoys dealing with Blondie Green and the lady from, should I call her a lady from Colorado? The two very controversial women.
I try to avoid them as much as possible. So I don't have much dealing with them, to be honest.
You're lucky, huh?
I did run into one in the locker room once, but well, thank you all again so much. It's so nice to be back here with you all. I think you all saw Bill Wells has announced that he's running against me, and I think you all know the sort of terrible racist things that he does. So I'd be honored to have your support once again in my race for re-election, and so grateful for everything all of you have done over, I guess, 6 years now, which makes me feel really old, that I've been doing this. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for your time. Wonderful. What a great opportunity for us. Wow. All right, we still have a little bit of business to finish up on our agenda. So I wanted to introduce a new membership level for millennials and Generation Z. If you were born after 1980, we now have an Amanda Gorman membership level. And the point of it is that we can try and get our granddaughters and our daughters and the young women in our life involved and get them here to the club and get them to join the club. So please reach out to the young women or men in your life and get them involved, because it's so important, as we just saw, why it's so important to have young people and their vitality, their energy, their ideas, everything about them. So let's try and do that. Well, we're off onto officer reports. These will probably be quick. Come on up here, Patricia. Patricia is our membership director, and so she is going to give her membership report.
Thank you. Just a quick ask, if you haven't signed in, please do. Thank you. We're looking forward to many new members this year too.
Why don't we have a show of hands of our new members tonight? I know several are here. Destiny, it's her birthday tonight, and she's here with us. Brand new member, she just joined. Priscilla joined tonight. Anybody else join tonight in the room? All right, thank you, ladies. You grab your names real quick. All right, Wendy and Judy. All right, welcome. Thank you so much. And we also have a new woman named Lena. I don't think she made it tonight, but we appreciate all of you. Oh, Aline? Lena? Oh, there she is. Lena, welcome to the club. She just renewed. Wonderful. So we're glad to have all of our new members and our renewed members. That's just as important. All right. So we've had membership. We've had treasurer. I'm president. I have no report. Secretary? No report. And our vice presidents are both traveling. So that was quick. Is there any unfinished business from previous meetings? I will say one thing, we wrote a letter to the Central Committee asking them to delay the early endorsements. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but they did receive our letter and from us and from several other clubs. Susan?
Okay, so I got an email from Sue Alderson, and the North County Women's March is providing training on reproductive justice. It's the core of reproductive justice's belief that all women have the right to have children, the right not to have children, and the right to nurture the children we have in a safe and healthy environment. And this is reproductive justice 101 training, and it's to commit ourselves to bringing awareness to important issues and community concepts, and to the important social justice concepts that people are struggling with. So anyway, if you are interested, the actual training is the part one is Saturday, April the 1st. It's 10 to 2, and the second is Saturday, April the 8th, 10 to 2. And Kathy and I are both signed up for it. You want to join us, and it's by Zoom.
And you can read about that on the page, the webpage for the North County Women's March. Just one second. All right, so the endorsement, going back to endorsements, we need an endorsement committee. We need an endorsement chair. If we're going to do endorsements, we need those things. So be thinking amongst yourselves, who wants to be more involved? Who wants to help us with these endorsements? They're such an important part of the club, and we need your help to get that done. We're only 2 members short in the East County of having a club associate at the caucus in the East County. And so if you know anyone in East that you can get them to join the club, that would be great too, because then we can have representation in the East. Susan has made one announcement. It looks like we have another announcement. Yes, we will have a table at the Roosevelt dinner. Yeah. Katie Porter is the keynote speaker. She was asking about the Roosevelt dinner. The Roosevelt dinner is coming up on April 22nd. The club will have a table there, and Katie Porter is the keynote speaker. All right. So it is, if we have no more unfinished business, no new business, if we can have announcements, if anybody has an announcement. Thank you. I'm getting my steps in.
I went up with the bus for the California Association of Retired Americans, and they
hang on one sec. So if you don't know what he's talking about, we had a chartered bus that went up to Kevin McCarthy's office.
That's exactly it.
All
I
right.
just wanted to say that they did a great job. They also had great speakers, and it was a good time to talk with each other about that. They are reminding the Congress that they should not touch Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid for that support. And I just wanted to mention one of my personal issues. I'm up in the San Diego Lagoon area, and those banks are falling into the lagoon out to the sea. Climate change is a real problem, and at all levels, our state, city, local, all the governments are not touching it. San Diego's tried, and it's not enough. And so it's serious. And if you're interested, I can talk to you about that. But
thank you. Any other announcements before we adjourn? We have reached the end of our agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? All right, Wendy, do I hear a second? Maureen, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.